Will intermittent fasting slow down my metabolism? Although there are many health benefits to intermittent fasting, such as improved insulin sensitivity, stem cell growth, and cellular autophagy, it can still have negative side effects if you overdo it. Fasting is a stressor to your body like any other. Physiologically, the stress response of fasting for 3 days is the same as running away from a lion. The difference is only a matter of degree and magnitude. That's why it's always important to remember the principle of hormesis when doing any kind of biohack or even optimizing your other areas of life. More is not always better, and usually you can get the majority of the results by reaching a certain point of peak efficiency. How able you are to practice fasting and how does it affect you specifically is gonna depend on many things like how fat adapted you are, do you have any medical conditions, and what's your emotional bandwidth.
I can't do it.
The idea of fasting slowing down your metabolism sounds reasonable and very intuitive because it's so simple. You skip a meal, you don't eat breakfast, and your body thinks it's starving. The next piece of food you put into your mouth is now gonna be directly stored as fat because your body thinks it's starving. Even a celery stalk will now make you fat if you haven't eaten for 16 hours. In reality, a slow metabolism is the effect of many other things that are all connected with each other. So let's look at some of the principles of how your body's metabolism regulates itself. Your metabolism is the overarching system by which you convert food into energy. That energy gets created from calories that can come from either the food that you ate or from your own body fat. How many calories you need to maintain physiological functioning depends on your basal metabolic rate, or BMR. Your BMR is determined by how much you weigh, what's your lean muscle mass, your sex, your age, and other factors. Your total daily energy expenditure, or TDE, is the total amount of energy you're burning throughout the 24-hour period. This is the number that tells you how much food you need to actually eat to either maintain, lose, or gain weight. Your TDE is determined by your BMR, your levels of physical activity, hormones, medical condition, what foods you eat, and in what amounts. Your actual metabolic rate is regulated through the thyroid gland, which is located in the front of your throat. Thyroid hormones like T3 and T4 affect your body temperature, heart rate, and daily caloric buffer zone. Your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT, includes the other physical activities that aren't exercise, like simply moving around the house, fidgeting, twitching, and waving your arms up in the air. If you restrict your calories, or you're gonna have lower thyroid, you'll have less energy, and you're gonna naturally compensate for that by lowering your NEAT. You're gonna start moving less because you wanna preserve more energy subconsciously, and that's going to, by default, lower your metabolism. In reality, there is no such thing as a slow or a fast metabolism, because how high or how low your metabolic rate is depends on the variables that can be regulated by either increasing energy expenditure or paying more attention to NEAT. Meal timing is also irrelevant. Studies have shown that eating more frequent meals doesn't have any benefit in terms of body composition. Eating 6 small meals isn't gonna stoke your metabolism because eating 2 large meals is gonna have the same thermic effect of food. The thermic effect of food, or how much of the food you ate gets burnt off as calories, depends on not the timing, but more on the macronutrient ratios of the meal. Protein has the highest thermic effect, or TEF. TEF of protein is 25 to 30%, TEF of carbs is 6 to 8%, and TEF of fat is 2 to 3%. On an average diet, the TEF of food is about 10%, which means that 10% of the calories you ate will be burnt off as energy. So, if your daily caloric intake is 2500, then you're still gonna have a TEF of 250, no matter how many meals you have. If you consume 2500 calories in total, then with 6 meals of 420 calories each, you're gonna be burning 42 calories per meal. If you multiply 42 with 6, you're gonna get 252 daily TEF. If you consume 4 meals of 625 calories each, you're gonna get 62 calories burned per meal. Multiply 62 with 4, 248 daily TEF. If you consume 2 meals of 1250 calories each, you're gonna end up with 125 calories burnt per meal. Multiply 125 with 2, you're gonna get 250 daily TEF. No matter what meal frequency you choose, you'll still be burning the same amount of calories from TEF, which means that the macronutrients themselves are gonna affect the TEF score.
Die, calories, die!
Your metabolic rate functions like in a positive feedback loop. You eat more, you weigh more, you need more energy to maintain that weight. Your metabolic rate will also be higher because of that, and you have to eat more food to maintain that balance. If you consume fewer calories than your TDE, whether because of fasting, dieting, or eating less, then you're naturally gonna lose some weight, which can be a good thing. If you repeat this pattern of putting in less fuel into your body, then it's gonna eventually down-regulate the body's requirements for that energy, and you'll become more preservative and more efficient with what you've got. This is gonna lead to a slightly lower TDE, just by virtue of your body needing less food. Fasting slowing down the metabolism is also mostly the result of simply eating less food or losing body weight, which will naturally make your body lower its homeostasis for caloric intake overall. Funny enough, fasting for 48 hours actually speeds up the metabolism by 3 to 14%. My theory is that when you start a fast, then the first days you're still running on your current TDE, which causes a slight bump in energy expenditure, but after a while you're gonna lower it down as a natural defensive response. Fasting for longer than 7 days will definitely lower your metabolic rate and decrease your protein demands as well. That's the point where your body literally goes into conservation mode and it wants to maintain as much energy as it can. But that's not gonna happen with simply fasting every day. Fasting itself can't directly lower your metabolism because you can still eat a whole bunch of food and maintain a certain metabolic rate. Eating fewer calories and starving yourself are the ones responsible for this.
Starving.
Fasting can potentially lead to a lower metabolic rate if it affects the thyroid gland in a negative way. If you haven't eaten anything in a long time, then there are gonna be fewer thyroid hormones in the blood, which will indicate the body that in order to survive, we need to preserve some energy. This can cause a disruption in the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis, which is the central stress response system in your body that also controls most of the hormones. When you experience stress of any kind, the hypothalamus tells the pituitary gland that you're under attack and you need to release certain hormones. The adrenal glands receive the same message and they're gonna release cortisol, which is gonna increase the amount of stress hormones and glucocorticoids in the bloodstream. This is gonna lower activated T3 and T4 in your blood. Glucocorticoids will also be converted to what's called reverse T3, which can't be used inside the cells for thyroid functioning, and therefore it can hurt the metabolism. The same effect can happen with caloric restriction diets, and I would suggest that it's much worse actually. If you're not getting enough calories and you're missing out on some of the micronutrients as well, then your body will be in this state of lower metabolic rate for much longer than if you were to simply fast for a few days and get it over with. Like we mentioned, fasting is a physiological stressor like any other, and many people are going to react differently to different kinds of stress. If you're more fat adapted, then you're gonna experience less stress from food deprivation. If you are less emotionally resilient, then you'll interpret the fast emotionally as more stressful than it actually is. Therefore, you're gonna release more glucocorticoids. If you're not sleeping enough, you're gonna be more tired, more insulin resistance, and you're gonna be more prone to storing food as fat. If you're not getting certain nutrients, you'll have less serotonin, which will disrupt the HPA axis, and it's gonna make you more prone to anxiety, which will then again reinforce the feedback loop. As you can see, there are many things that determine what your metabolic rate is and how many calories you have to eat to maintain your body's functioning. You have to know whether or not fasting is an additional stressor that exceeds the positive beneficial hormetic zone, or are you simply under-adapted to a specific type of a fasting protocol. Your body will adapt to any kind of stress it gets put under. However, there's always the cost of trading between certain hormonal outputs or metabolic processes. For instance, if fasting causes you excess stress and you have more cortisol, you'll eventually lower your thyroid and testosterone, which will lower your metabolism as well. Then you have to know what kind of other stresses you need to pay attention to in your life, and whether or not it's worth it to fast.
Get help.
Fasting potentially lowering your TDE is actually the result of eating fewer calories overall. You may accidentally eat far less than you need just because of not feeling hungry, and that's gonna eventually downregulate your caloric demands. So instead of dieting and starving yourself for a month, you would be actually better off by simply fasting for 5 days and getting it over with.
I need a horse.
So here's what to do to not slow down your metabolism with fasting. First, you have to practice slightly longer eating windows. In my opinion, the warrior diet with 20 hours of fasting and 4 hours of eating is probably the optimal window. The 16 and 8 window isn't really fasting, it's more like time restricted feeding. Secondly, make sure you eat enough calories when you break the fast. The biggest reason people slow down their metabolism is that they combine extended fasts with severe caloric restriction as well. Third, get enough micronutrients that promote thyroid hormones and the metabolism, such as iodine, vitamin D, omega-3s, magnesium, electrolytes, selenium. Seafood, fish and eggs in particular are quite good and useful for thyroid and HPA functioning. Tyrosine-rich foods that support the thyroid are pumpkin seeds, beef, poultry, almonds, avocados, eggs and fish. They also have B12 and selenium. Certain healthy fats that promote ketone production can give your body the necessary fat-soluble vitamins which are needed for hormone production. MCT oil has been shown to have a direct thermic effect that increases metabolic rate. However, you still have to watch out for that MCT poop though. 6. Limit goitrogenic foods. Goitrogens are compounds that can affect the thyroid gland if you consume them in large amounts. Foods high in goitrogens are things like cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cabbage, kale, and some fruit. If you think you have thyroid issues, then you should definitely not eat raw vegetables. Cooking or steaming your vegetables is gonna lower the number of goitrogens in these foods. 7. Keeping your overall stress low is also essential for preventing slow thyroid. You wanna get enough deep sleep, exposure to natural sunlight, enough exercise, hydration, rest, and not overproduce cortisol. You don't wanna consume too much caffeine, you don't wanna do too much high intensity exercise, and you don't wanna be stressed out with work. Number 8. Certain herbs like ashwagandha, ginseng, holy basil, rhodiola rosea, lion's mane, dandelion, and chards, they can support the thyroid and lower stress by promoting the parasympathetic recovery mode. And 9. A healthy insulin spike can also help. If you eat some carbohydrates like a sweet potato or rice, then you can boost your metabolic rate, especially if you're eating a low-carb diet.
I haven't had a carb since 2004.
When it comes to exercise, then doing low-intensity cardio for long periods of time will make your body more efficient at performing exercise at that particular intensity. This is gonna decrease your metabolic rate to maintain those intensities of exercise. It's like another evolutionary trade-off between becoming more efficient with producing more ATP from fewer calories. Having more muscle mass will increase your BMR, which will become increasingly more valuable as you age. It's a general trend that as you age, your BMR decreases alongside with other metabolic factors, and you're gonna lose lean muscle mass. Now the question I wanna ask is it because of the aging that your metabolism slows down, or is it because of the decrease in muscle mass and physical activity that your metabolism has slowed down? You can ask the same thing about growth hormone. Do older people have lower levels of growth hormone because of their old age, or is it because they've become sedentary and they're not exercising? That's why I think it's super important to keep yourself physically fit no matter what age you are. Getting old is not an excuse. You have to be even more diligent about it as you become older, because you're gonna get more fragile if you don't.
Gotta get pumped up.
The concluding answer again is yes, but no. Fasting will inevitably lower your metabolic rate slightly, but it's not a bad thing. It's simply a natural response to food deprivation that's gonna go back to normal after you start eating. You don't have to worry about fasting wrecking your hormones or thyroid as long as you fast reasonably. You also have to make sure that you follow up your fasting with feasting. Truth is that being stressed out about fasting is gonna raise cortisol, which makes the experience of fasting more stressful than it actually is. That's why it's again a good idea to become keto adapted when doing fasting, because you're gonna have less hunger, you'll burn fat more easily, your brain will have more access to energy and you'll feel generally more comfortable doing it. So keto fasting and keto IF, they're your go-to resources again. Body-mind empowerment.
Get stronger, faster, smarter, quicker, friendlier, more helpful, more driven.
Everything the body needs.
Control your mind.